we're happy to have Graham Leicester today joining us from the United Kingdom to share reflections on the collective narrative that he received a couple of days ago. Graham, it's all yours.
Thank you, Fyodor, and thank you everyone for turning up, showing up, which is the first rule. I always find it difficult to get into these kinds of spaces, especially online. And so we have in IFF, International Futures Forum, we often use our little kit bag, which I'll say a little bit more about in a moment, but it's just a way of helping us kind of make the transition into a different space together, and a separate space. So I'm going to share my screen and show one of the little elements of kit bag, which are these little presence cards. And I'm just going to deal one and then follow its instructions, if you'll bear with me, partly to settle myself, but also just to settle ourselves into this space. So there we are. There's a little timer. We'll do that for a minute. Be content to just sit here and breathe. Great, thank you very much. So that's just to settle ourselves into the space. I'd like to use another piece of the kit bag as well just now. This is the feelings card, and again, this is just to bring ourselves into the space as humans and just recognize how we're feeling right now. What color are you feeling and why? So it's just a chance for each of us to reflect. There may be a color there that speaks to you. It may be that you don't know how you're feeling until you say, oh, I'm drawn to that color. It must be because of this. So it's just a way of tuning into our bodies and our emotions. And if you want to note down in the chat what color you're feeling and why, or even just which color spoke to you, that would be helpful in getting a sense of actually there's a feeling human being in this space. We are individually and collectively a human being. See how I'm feeling. Yeah, it's possible to be feeling different colors at the same time. Blue like the sky, orange. Oh, great. It's interesting how, these different colors mean different things to different people. And that's why we use the color chart rather than, are you happy, sad, where are you on the scale? We talk about the science of qualities, not the science of quantities. The meaning is personal. How you're feeling is how you're feeling. How those colors speak to you is how they speak to you at this moment. So thank you for that. That gives me a kind of better sense of where we are. It's actually quite calm, which is good. And I wanted to thank you for the engaging with the IFF's work to the extent that you have, and for the comments that were fed through to me. And I want to honor those by, this is the way conversations work. You've offered some reflections, and I want to offer some reflections back and see where that goes as a conversation. I wanted to start with, I got a note through, big note saying, group reflections on the work and teachings of Graham Leicester, which I'm afraid rather spooked me because I don't think of myself as having work and teachings, certainly not having teachings. We all have work, but I don't see myself as a teacher. And I wanted to start there as a reflection, really, about that framing. I don't see myself as a teacher. I do see myself as a writer. I mean, I haven't written books and pamphlets and things, and you've engaged with some of that. I hope I've been diligent enough always to acknowledge that I'm writing the thoughts of others and synthesizing the thoughts of others. International Futures Forum, which started back in 2001, is a collective. It's an association of wonderful people. What we come to call now a collective intelligence. And I don't think even they would agree with everything that I've written out of all. This is a synthesis of a number of different perspectives. We talk about the need to have a lot of different perspectives to deal with complexity. Well, they turn up in human form as well. They turn up as wisdom, knowledge, ignorance. Sometimes they turn up with ego attached. And our job in IFF has been to somehow harness all of those different perspectives and feed them back in a way that might be useful to others. I'm not just being humble, although I hope I am being humble. I'm also saying that is a practice, that if we want to encourage multiple perspectives, then, we've got to find smart ways of sharing those. It reminded me too of a number of the reflections as well. There was a talk about where's the kind of backstory, the history. So very briefly, say something about the founding of IFF back in 2001, a bit of my background. I used to be in the Foreign Service. So working in government in the Foreign Office in the UK, mostly dealing at that stage with Hong Kong, China reclaiming sovereignty over Hong Kong, and then the European Union. So, my previous career lies in tatters around me, like many of my colleagues, actually, especially at a time like this. But it was a great grounding in the challenge of dealing with complex issues, global, complex human issues. Diplomacy is a human art. It's human to human. It is personal in the end. It is about maintaining relationships. I maybe didn't know that at the time, but I know that now. I've come to see that now. But having come out of that policy background, my sense was that policy didn't work. The mess was still around us, and that particularly we formed this idea of a world that we don't understand and can't control. This was towards the end of the 20th century. I began to see that, maybe the world is just too complex and fast moving and interconnected for the ways that we try to make policy and address the challenges. And that this is actually a world we don't understand and can't control. And we need to learn how to be effective and responsible in that environment. And that's what led to the founding of the International Futures Forum, as I say, bringing together a lot of great people from different perspectives who shared that one perspective that we really don't understand what's going on anymore. And so the first, the bit I'm laboring here is that our very first meeting in the spring of 2001, there were some people who came with the answer. And they did have the answer. I mean, they had big parts of the answer, huge experience, lots of wisdom and lots of practical knowledge. And, if that were the answer, then we wouldn't be in the mess we're in. It's necessary, but not sufficient. So we wanted people to engage, holding their own knowledge lightly and moving into our collective ignorance. I said, there's something to be discovered here, which will discover together, which none of us knows, but we can find together. Now, some people didn't come back for the second meeting because they felt maybe disrespected, but the ones who did were absolutely in that learning space that a number of people reflected on in the notes, that space of listening and not knowing. And in between the first and the second meeting, and I was thinking of this in the context of what's going on at the moment, was the attack on the Twin Towers, September 2001. So we too had that big existential global shock. Absolutely, knocked us into, oh, goodness me, we really don't know, do we? But you'll see in the IFF, one of our mantras is the equal and opposite is also true. Of course, we do know there are plenty of people who saw that coming as well and could point to, this was exactly the scenario that we told the Pentagon about. And so every shock, every surprise has also been predicted. So but it still comes as an existential challenge. So that really, I think, knocked us into another dimension of learning, much deeper conversations, much deeper learning. It's a shame that was the price that had to be paid, but that's what happened. It got us to the point here. So there's quite a lot of reflection in the notes about complexity. And I think that is where we started, a complex world we don't understand and can't control. But pretty soon we now talk about 3 interlocking emergencies: a real emergency, the challenges we face in the world; a conceptual emergency, trying to get our heads around that to make sense of the world well enough. This is where the policymakers come in, making sense of that the world well enough to intervene effectively; and then an existential emergency, how all of that leaves us feeling individually and collectively at a human level. And those 3 emergencies are intertwined. And we now see, although we wrote a book, and some people referred to it, the book 10 Things to Do in a Conceptual Emergency, which we wrote back in 2003, implied in those 10 things, although we highlighted the conceptual emergency, it was also about the real emergency and the existential. Finally, we're just want to say a couple of things about what we're up to now, bring us up to speed. There was a great piece in here in the reflections. I thought, at last, if I were a teacher, it would be, gold star, top of the class. On the other hand, we also talked about how reading Graham's work felt like we were downloading something we already knew. It gave us a language for what we already knew and experienced. It felt like he used a language that we comprehend, a language that represents us and resonates with us. And that is absolutely spot on for me, that we do already know this stuff. We are already supremely, Roberto Unger talks about us having a divine imagination. We can imagine universes. We can live larger lives. We have a limitless potential. So yes, we do know this stuff already, and our favorite words are about evoking competence, calling it out of people. That's what education used to be about, calling it forth, enabling. We talk a lot about the enabling conditions for these strengths to show themselves in ourselves and in each other. Revelation, can we reveal the resources that are all around us? We talk a lot about configuring abundance. There are abundant resources. Can we reveal them? Can we find them? And permission. We have a little device with a little permission slip. You have permission to do this transformative work. Is it safe? Is it legal? Etc. Etc. Have you got a friend? Don't try it on your own. If so, you already have permission. You don't need permission. You already have it. Get on with it. So this is about uncovering, recovering, discovering resources that are already there in ourselves and others. So I responded as I was reading through. There was quite a lot of, we need to do this. We need to make sure this happens. And it felt more like building something or contributing something rather than nurturing something that's already there, which is absolutely the IFF stance. There's quite a lot in there about transformative innovation, shifting systems towards new patterns of viability fit for the future rather than just propping up the old. And we could talk about that. I guess there's the one thing to say about that right now is that propping up the old is not a bad thing. I've come. You'll hear, as I think I've already said it. The IFF mantra: the equal and opposite is also true. We mustn't make the existing system. We mustn't make the past wrong. We mustn't make the existing system wrong. Or if we do, we must do it consciously, recognizing that if we do make it wrong, we're giving ourselves another hill to climb. So for me, this notion of system transition rather than system change is about the transition from one system to another over time. We talk actually back in 10 Things to Do in a Conceptual Emergency. We quote John Vasconcelos talking about we have to be hospice workers for the dying culture and midwives for the new. And somebody reflected that back in the notes. And you've got to do both. I think you have to do both. And both are part of the system transition. And hospice work is a caring, compassionate calling. People say, yeah, we don't want hospice workers, we need undertakers or assassins even. I said, no, be careful what you wish for. Be careful what you wish for. This is a human system we're talking about. We have to treat it with care, both the hospice work and the midwifery. And so I used to get frustrated that the so-called transformative initiatives would be taken up by the old system, and somehow violate the spirit, take the potential to improve what we have, but not the potential to shift to another, if you like, to let another set of values come to the fore. I used to be frustrated by that. I now recognize that first of all, it's inevitable. You can't resist. If resistance is futile, it is inevitable. And secondly, actually maintaining some of the services on which we rely is actually part of the system transition. It buys us time. Now, if we can do this consciously, if we can be conscious, what's the word? Conscious participants in system transition, then I think we're making progress. And part of it, going back to my policymaking background, I'd like policymakers to become conscious, to make policy for conscious system transition rather than just for system change. When I do talk about transformative innovation as a method, that's where we get into tools and frameworks, and we can discuss that. And we published a book on transformative innovation back in 2016. And I thought that we wanted to capture what we'd learned over 15 years of practice, in as simple in terms that were as simple as possible and no simpler. And we published it as a hardback. It was like a kind of car manual, carry this around with you. If the car breaks down, go to page whatever. You don't have to read it like a book. It's the clutch has failed. I'll look at the. So it really was intended as real hard practical advice. And then shortly after that came out, somebody else, my friend Alex Grimshaw, a leadership development consultant in the States, bought 300 copies of a previous book, Dancing at the Edge, which I wrote with Maureen and O'Hara, about competence. Let me see. Competence, culture, and organization in the 21st century. So that was a book about the 21st century competencies, and it was published, about 4 years previously. And in a way, I'd forgotten it existed until somebody bought 300 copies. I'd kind of forgotten that we'd done that, and I realized that in writing Transformative Innovation, we had kind of assumed that the people doing this work had the 21st century competencies and were ready for it. But that has reminded me and actually sent me right back to, it's the human system that matters. It's human systems that transform. It's in our humanity that we find this unlimited potential. And so it's kind of reminded me, yeah, that actually is the fundamental. There's probably a reason why that book came first, and we must go back to it as the fundamental. So finally, I guess there are three things I would, when I did teach, therefore, transformative innovation, I used to say, you only need three things to do this work. So one is this little box of IFF prompt cards, which I always carry with me. And these are little prompts that came out of our first 2 years of work about, what to look for, how to think, how to shift our perception, ways of operating if you don't know. How can you show up conscious of your ignorance, but also conscious of your capacity? So it's kind of tapping into other capacities. So we say, pick one of these cards when you don't quite know what you're doing or what to do or what to see, or they're prompts for guidance. So I carry this around with me. We've already had a look. This is the mini kit bag with it had a little egg timer and some of those mindfulness presence cards, the feelings card, and some other animal cards actually with animal qualities. I'm not sure if Theodore will allow us to have an animal card to finish, but we might do. So that's a reminder. So that the cards are the cards are the reminder of if you like, the conceptual emergency. The kit bag is about the humans. Get the humans in the space. Can we reveal a pattern of simple human relationship. So those are those reminders. So I say all you need is these two things and yourself. And yourself. And I kind of forgotten that this is human work. And and actually this is what we're working with. One of my great mentors, Jim Ewing, and we use a lot of his tools. If we're going to get on to tools and frameworks, we use a lot of his tools and frameworks. But they like Maureen's work, they're embedded in a deep sense of human potential. And one of the things he said shortly before he died, actually, Jim, he said, I quote, "To be a transformative presence is the highest form of our art." And that's what's got me, as a learner, and we're all learners. That's what's got me. That's what stayed with me. I want to be able to say, you need this. Actually, no. This is it. To be a transformative presence is the highest form of our art. That's my response to your prompting. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Graham. Okay, so we'll start with a very technical question.
Hi. Yes. All those cards and the different tools you were sharing sounds beautiful. Are they available for us?
Well, I'm glad you asked. They are available, and actually, because of the pandemic, we've now got them available in an online form as well. Yes, so please use them.
Hi, Graham. I think I'm wording this right. You talked about how systems transition is about humans. It's human transition. These are human systems we're dealing with. And I was wondering, because we live in a greater system of non-humans, of course, I was wondering if the focus on compassion for humans has ever come into conflict, in your experience, with compassion for the living system as a whole. And alongside that, what is your definition of compassion? Because I imagine different people might not only define that different, but maybe even take liberties with that a little bit. So I'm interested to see what your definition of compassion is.
Right. You start with the difficult one, Melissa. Well, let's start with the system transition. So this is why I'm not a teacher. All I can do is pass on my experience. We've had all kinds of ways of trying to, I suppose, boil down what it is that we've learned into, like 10 things to do in it's the kind of listicle almost, and not lose the richness. So there's another list called five principles of a second enlightenment. One of which is the shift from fragmentation to wholeness. And wholeness, these are just words, but they are the work that we're doing most of the time is about expansion. It is about expansion. I used to, when we talk about the world we don't understand, can't control, and the complexity. Well, we can't get our arms around all of the complexity, but could you just extend it a little bit? So we did a lot of work on climate change and energy. Could we do both at the same time? Could we? Just take a little bit more of the context into consideration. The great Max Boiseau, another of our founder members, used to say that the wisdom of a decision is proportionate to the depth and breadth of context that you've taken into account in taking it. So I would not say. So I don't know. I don't know where the right place is to draw the boundary. I do know that the wider the boundary, the better. One of our prompt cards says, "Do not let our values limit our circle of empathy," which is an invitation to expand. I remember the very first International Futures Forum gathering, a man called Mark Woodhouse, who wrote a great book, Paradigm Wars. We started around 4 themes of governance, economy, sustainability, and consciousness. And we went through, and what are the big questions in each of these? And under consciousness, his question is still with me. He said, "Does it matter if my cat is happy?" So there are all these other great questions of the age, and I thought, oh yeah, absolutely. That's not answering your question, but offering that it is a question. We're doing a bit of work with the conservation, with a number of conservation NGOs at the moment, whose focus is on so-called biodiversity, where the equal and opposite challenge comes in. Can we include humans as part of wildlife? So it's always looking for this extension. What's the definition of compassion? It's not a word I use. It's not a word I use. I'm a wordsmith. I said I'm a writer. First and foremost, I'm a writer. I love words. Some words I think have become so debased that they don't mean anything anymore. And I fear that compassion is getting a bit like that. And having had a British public school education, I know the kind of the Latin roots of com, with, passion, suffer, or feel. So compassion for me is just feeling with, suffering with, feeling with. It's so close to empathy. So I don't like the compassion word. I don't know why. I think it's been bureaucratized. I prefer the love word, which must be part of it.
I have that same idea around sustainability, and that word really bothers me because I wonder how we sustain. I have an organization that I've started and developed and created, and the challenge is trying to bring in the human hearts up and to the transformative part. When is that transition shifting the organization, or is it shifting the organization? I'm always baffled on how to help them bring their own willingness from that passion. So I guess my question is, how do you work with that within IFF?
Well, it's interesting to think about language, just on that sustainability word.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a word 20 years old, that word. We may have a different word today. We may be talking about regenerative or something. I guess the IFF was formed out of an impatience with the ineffectiveness of action and practice. And we're very good at changing the words and getting a better definition. And look, we've just had our 20th anniversary. The world is not in much better a place than it was when we started this work. The equal and opposite is also true. There's plenty of great stuff going on as well. So I try not to get hung up on the words. And I guess that leading into how to work with communities. Again, we are not experts in that either, but we do try to start where people are. When we started that work back in 2001, we had a great man called Andrew Lyon, who we brought in, as we called it in those days, forgive us, the converter. We said we'll need someone to convert our great ideas into action. So we get a converter, and I asked some very wise people, what's the job description? Where will we find someone like this? They said, well, do you know anyone who does that? And I thought, well, I do know this guy, Andrew Lyon. Well, go and talk to him then. And he came in, and he worked a lot with communities, mostly in Glasgow, where he is from. And he shifted us. He said, this is about a learning cycle. This is a learning cycle. There's a bit where we've codified some ideas and we now want to absorb them into practice. And getting around that bit, if you say that that's conversion, this is back to the teaching, I guess. If you say that that's conversion, you're building a mountain for yourselves. He came up with the word convergence. He said, I'm a converger. It's a bit like that bit that I read out. This represents us and resonates with us. Can I reveal something that these people already know? I think it's a really subtle process. Another thing that Jim Ewing used to say was, you've got to give these people a jolly good listening to. They're playing up. Give them a jolly good listening to.
I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on language. I work with a conceptual visual language. I work with deaf kids, actually in an indigenous tribal situation.
Yeah.
And it's changed my brain because I have to rewire to think conceptually. And so I'm wondering, I know there's like some written languages that are more visual, conceptual than others that it can put together, which I don't know, obviously, but how do you kind of synthesize throughout other languages?
So I'm with Rilke, live the questions. That's a great question which we are living with. And my first thought there was, well, another of the 5 principles of the Second Enlightenment is expand what constitutes what we think of as knowledge. I'm talking about expansion. It's why these cards, these little prompt cards, they all have images as well. It's why we looked at those colors. We're trying to, we are so multi-perceptory, if that's a word. We're making meaning out of absolutely everything. I mean, I'm looking at that guitar on your wall. I've already got a whole story about you. I saw that in the reflections as well. We need to do this, we need to do that. We're doing it anyway. We're doing this anyway. I guess it's can we do it more consciously, and what does it afford? What does it enable? That too is not an answer, but I think it's a really, we've got to open all of our channels of perception. Yeah. And I think for me, I always start from the assumption that we're doing that anyway, that they are speaking to us. Question: can we make that conscious?
My question to further in personal messages, because I'm from Russia, and everything that is going on right now, and all our thoughts are around and about the conflict that started and is actually maintaining and escalating just day after day. And as a professional, as a system thinker, I am trapped, and I'm very, very concerned about what I can do. Can I do anything in general? Because I'm in Russia. I'm from an international company that has an office in Ukraine, and my heart just pains to think that I'm powerless and disempowered to do anything in general. So, a word of advice from you: how do you see your role and the International Futures Forum and your idea of transformative innovation in this context? And can I apply any ideas? And how do you think, is there any starting point where I can apply my professional knowledge, and anything you can suggest would be just great, because we don't want to drop this question. We really, really want to start solving it. Thank you.
Yeah. So thanks, Sophia. I was worried that this question would come up inevitably, and it's part. I think now I think about it, it's by being emphasizing the lack of answers right from the start, because I don't have an answer to the critical question, and I'm not in your position. That's so all I can speak to is my own experience and the advice of the wise people around me. I guess I wrote another highly recommended little volume called Beyond Survival, which I think is actually the volume for this moment. It's free online, and it's really a distillation of IFF's thinking and practice in response to crisis. The first version was written in response to the financial crash. This version was written in response to the pandemic. But I was just reading this, here are 4 essays exploring the resources we need to draw on in this as in any other crisis. And although I say it myself, it's very eloquent and, really short. So I would recommend that first. What it says, and I did talk to Maureen O'Hara, my co-author, before coming on this call about this question. And part of it, this really is the admission of ignorance. That's the first step. I think, we really don't know what to do. We can be completely ignorant at the system level. Now, I must be careful not to make anybody wrong, as I was saying earlier, but there's a rush to interpret what's happening and to write the strategy, and this must be happening. There's a rush into the abstract, which may be an escape. It may be a way of escaping dealing with the reality. It not necessarily, but it may be. We talk a lot about psychological literacy. Can we read our own psychological response to what's going on? There's a kind of neurotic denial. It's not happening. You're lost, Sophia, but we're not. I know how this is going to pan out. That's a kind of denial. It's protecting ourselves, and it's natural. There's a kind of collapse. There's a Lord knows, eat, drink, and be merry. Who knows? There's a kind of giving up, psychological collapse, and there's a transformative response. Yeah, this is all really difficult, and I don't know what's going to happen and how we're going to get through it. But this is the humanity, but we're born for this. This is how we grow. We know that there are cycles of, loss and grief and development and all the rest of it. That's part of our human psyche as well. So that's ultimately hopeful. But I talked to Maureen, what do you do at this point? Well, this really is the recognition of ignorance. We don't, at the system level, we're powerless, but at the human level, we're not. So this is back to doing what you can with the people who are around you, for yourself and others. It's what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to sort out the global system, but to work with the people who are suffering around me, and provide space for that. Václav Havel and his Power of the Powerless, wonderful essay. It's all in the Beyond Survival book, actually, about what do you tap into when you've lost, when you feel powerless? You tap into your humanity, you tap into the others around you, and you find agency. What can you do? All those people turning up at Berlin railway station, I can take someone in. I can do something. What can I do? And it may be that your professional skills will find a place eventually, but maybe not right now. This might be the time to keep the head down, maintain that kind of creative human integrity in place for the time when it's safe to grow it again.
Yeah. And Ray, we'll have 10 minutes, so 30 seconds for the question and a couple of minutes for answer. So Ray?
Okay, let's save most of the time for Graham then. So 20 years on, what's next for the IFF?
Two things. One is a shift that's been underway for a number of years now, which is towards configuring the abundance of the community of people around us. So that's a shift from we know what to do, here's that the conversion into the convergence. And can we support the people who are doing this work wherever they are, and whatever the work is? So configuring the abundance of the community. And secondly, actually stripping back, after 20 years, we've kind of grown barnacles and all kinds of stuff, and stripping back to the essence, which is why I'm emphasizing, maybe it's time to get back to, let's start again with the prompt cards and the kit bag. Because I think if I planted those seeds tomorrow, IFF would regenerate from there. So I'm keen to give that a go.
ECO stands for ecology, economy stands for business, and I am trying to do an eco pilot village, thinking how can your tools and guidance help us? I know it's a large question, but at least you know who we are, Meraki people, and I'm Christiana. Thank you.
Great to meet you, Christiana. This is what it's all about. So we always say we work with people, not issues. So actually, I'm more interested in you, Christiana, than the eco. And do get in touch.
Okay, excellent. I will get your email and then we will proceed. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, great. And Dunya?
I will read out this passage that has captivated me and then ask my questions. And it's a passage from the 10 Things to Do in a Conceptual Emergency. So you write, the new organizational structure is a pattern of relationships that is able to maintain its integrity over time. It has the discipline to perform the ordinary as well as the ordinary task, can support a sense of moral purpose beyond its own survival, is open and inclusive, nurtures and supports its members in a challenging environment, and pays generous and caring attention to the demands of the old culture while midwifing the new. The discovery of this form, and it will be discovered, not invented, will be a critical advance for all sectors. And our work suggests we're likely to find it first in the arts. So what in your work suggests that we're likely to find it first in the arts? And what does that tell us about how to invoke this form in other contexts or sectors?
Wow, that is a great passage. Thank you for reminding me of that. I think I'll pin it up on my wall and try to be re-inspired by it. Why in the arts? I guess because we were doing a lot of work around, how does the human system organize to perform the extraordinary? And the arts do that. anyway. They they create something that wasn't there. They bring into being something new. They imagine it and then they create it in the presence of the old. And this is about balancing the ordinary and the extraordinary. So the really great. We are very keen on the role of the producer. The producer who balances the needs of the funders and all the rest of it, and the health and safety, with the creative artists, and also keeps them a bit like Fyodor, make sure that they perform, and also the arts themselves. This a little bit relates back to Heather's question about language and means of expression. I think it's Picasso. He said, was it an artist is not a special kind of person. Every person is a special kind of artist. That's what I mean about expanding. They are consciously expanding the ways that they find to express the inexpressible. So, I just think there's something. Maureen O'Hara talked about the arts as the crucible of the new consciousness, and always have been. So there's something special about that. There's something special about the arts as a means of expression. And let's remember, we're all artists.
In the transition of human systems from fragmentation to wholeness, which I couldn't agree more, is what we need, what we're after, and what probably everybody here is trying to do in some way. How do we know how well we're doing? You even just said a few minutes ago, since the time you started IFF to now, you're not entirely optimistic about the progress we've made, but how can we tell? How do we know what our own state of well-being is?
You kind of threw a curveball in right at the end there by saying, how do we know how our own state of well-being is? So this is about, I guess that's about, where do we draw it's the boundaries again? Who's the we? It comes back a little bit to, we talk about a lot about integrity. So Dunia's point about, organizational forms, we said, well, we've, our first stab at that is this notion of an integrity. So we make a big thing about feeling out of integrity. When you feel out of integrity, that's the warning sign that something's wrong with the well-being. How are we going on the move from fragmentation to wholeness? It's always a dilemma. There's another great book about the Peckham Project, a healthcare project in the 1930s in the UK, called Being Me and Also Us. That's just a timeless dilemma, being me and also us. It's why I concentrate on the human system. Because we can take a bigger view of the wholeness, abstractly. How many lines have we got on our spreadsheet? How many bits of data are we throwing in, and how many different columns? But what about us? Where's the us? I suppose I'm most concerned about the sense of wholeness there, and it's not just wholeness. It's being me, and also us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Graham. And thank you, everybody, for your questions, reflections, and presence. And with that, Graham, I'll leave it to you to share closing remarks and animal card, of course. Right. So what do you want to leave us with?
What do I want to leave you with? Well, I'm feeling energized. If I did the feelings card again, I started with a kind of light blue, bit washed out, but still light. This has felt light, which is remarkable given what we're dealing with, and I feel energized. Another thing that Maureen O'Hara says, consciousness is horizontal, and I'm noticing that more and more. That if I'm feeling something in a group, chances are other people are feeling it too, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. So I'm feeling energized. So I think that I'm picking some of that up from you, and I appreciate that. It's also helped me thinking through, getting to the essence, finding the essence is of all of this work, especially after 20 years, is really, really tricky. And this conversations like this help. So thank you for listening. Thank you for giving me a good listening too. And I'm going to finish, as Fyodor says, with the final element is in the mini kit bag. These are the animal cards. They're numbered 1 to 26. Once I flip them over, each one has a picture of an animal and a quality that associated with that animal. But it's also, each of these are human qualities. And so your task now is to pick a number between 1 and 26, bear it in mind, and then I'm going to turn them all over on the count of 3, and you'll see this is a little gift from IFF to you to take into the rest of the day and whatever lies ahead. Let's see, I've picked my number. Here they come. And again, if you want to put your animal in the chat box, that would be interesting. I got the dog of understanding. So I think that's an invitation to me to process the conversation and see actually why am I energized? What have I understood that I didn't understand before I started? And the great thing is, I mean, they're childish toys, but we're all children at heart. And the great thing is that these are all human qualities, and we have them all. We have the whole deck. You know, I'm carrying those around with me as well.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
So thank you. And I look forward to being in touch with anyone who gets in touch.
Hello. Everybody. Well, thank you so much, Graham. It's been a treat. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Theodore. Bye for now.